So many different metaphors have come to me about the pandemic. Maybe it's like one big shared experience of being that frog in a pot where we slowly lose more and more verve, not really realizing it. Or better yet, suffering from some equivalent of seasonal melancholy. And then right when the sun started to get stronger, the great hand of fate set the clock back by a couple of months. And we all got deflated a bit. But as someone who struggles actually a little bit with seasonal melancholy, slowing down a little energetically as the days get shorter, I happen to know there is a cure. Turn your face toward the sun. You know, how all those folks, myself included, have ways to make sure we get that full spectrum light that resets our bodies and our brains, either sitting in the sun intentionally for 15 or 20 minutes a day whenever the sun is strongest, or buying one of those silly visors or lights to read the morning paper by to make up for those days of low light. Well, you and I, we can turn toward the light too. We can choose to focus on what gives us life and pleasure in the midst of so much that's hard, now, always. The truth is, I think consciously or unconsciously we do that, like plants with that phototropic reflex, right? Who turn toward the sun, so do we. I mean, sometimes it's not necessarily conscious. We just gravitate toward that glass of wine at the end of the day, or find ourselves binging that Netflix series, maybe Succession. Who would do that? It's a great series, though, isn't it? I mean, who would do that? Early in the pandemic, my secret pleasure was watching disaster movies. Always popular, I think. I also think there's been a resurgence. Just this week, I was in a hospital going to visit someone, and I walked by at 9 a.m. by a patient's TV just as a huge fireball was hitting planet Earth. The movie had the Twin Towers in the background of the New York scene of the disaster, so it was clearly a classic of the genre. But, I mean, we do feel a little better, don't we, when life is in the dumpster, watching a fictional movie about when life quite literally is being destroyed by some great tsunami in the wake of a planet-ending strike of a comet or whatever that fireball was. But then again, last week we had a tsunami warning. You either have to laugh or cry. So after this last setback, when a friend asked me what gave me joy, and maybe I should focus on that, and I realized I had no idea. I hadn't really thought about what gave me joy, and then Allison was thinking about it, and we started talking about it, and I started paying attention to it, because truly, I'm not running around skipping and laughing in wild-eyed joy these days. I'm not there, but I did pay attention to what gives me pleasure, and for me, lately, I think it's boiled down to what my two favorite times of the day are. It's probably just a little thing, I guess, but this is what I've got right now. First, dinner time. Dinner time when we all sit down at the table, my husband, our dog attentively begging, and two teenagers, our daughter and our nephew who's living with us. These last two at the family table are increasingly busy, and so because we're not the center of their lives as much anymore, dinner time is when we actually get to catch up with them, which is great. And the question that we started asking as a family was, tell us a highlight and a low light from your day, and everybody would go around and do that. But over time, that's morphed, and we're really not asking anymore, not that anyone made a conscious decision about a low light, though everyone knows they can share one if they have one, and they need to. And every time we do ask what everybody's highlight for the day is, one person calling us back to that family ritual, there's this way that everyone gets quiet, and you hear this inhale of breath at the table. As everyone thinks, everybody runs through the day that's just passed with a kind of happiness or satisfaction comb to find the biggest. Well, what do combs find in days that are nice? Flowers that dropped into your hair, I guess, would be the metaphor. And then what comes up? It's like sometimes it's a funny moment in a class or a hard thing that one of us was finally able to finish and feel good about, or a sweet moment when an underclass person at school reached out for support, or sometimes it's just that bus that arrived right as you stepped up to the stop, or how you got some gadget taken off the back of your braces, the gadget that constantly hurt your mouth, and so your life is a little more joyful and easy. And then how other stories inevitably turn and tumble out. Like how I wanted to explain that there might be a mess in the kitchen when I was thinking through my day, and was reminded that I needed to explain to people that, well, that I hadn't had a chance to clean it all up, but last week, Sunday, when Carmen got sick and I was so preoccupied Sunday early morning, writing and pulling together the parts of worship that she was going to lead, I forgot about the eggs that were boiling on the stove. And do you know what? Do you know what happens to eggs that are left boiling in a pan after the water evaporates? I guess it's like a scientific home ec discovery. Well, what happened in my house last week was that one of the eggs exploded. And when it did, the chalky egg yolk flew in little bits all over the stove and counters everywhere, and it stuck. And when I rushed in to see what the explosion had been and realized what had happened, I took the pan that had the 2 remaining eggs in it and I rushed it over to the sink and I filled it with water. And when I did so, the second egg exploded, blowing chalky egg yolk all over me, sticking to my hair and pajamas and the counter and the window behind the sink. And how on a day when COVID pulled the rug a little more out from under me, I stood in a kitchen covered with egg quite literally on my face. And I had to laugh. I mean, you either laugh or you roll up like the pill bug, right? So better to think yourself in a Laurel and Hardy movie than in the one with the fireball hitting Earth. And telling it at dinner, all the stress and strangeness of the day and the morning evaporated and everybody laughing, which sometimes, if you let it in, I don't know, sometimes the worst moments of life and the moment that they happen with time, you learn, can be the funniest stories and the ones that bond you to one another as we make it through life. So dinner time. And if you ask me what my other favorite part of the day is, it used to be the early morning. It's the time when I get up before everyone else and I drink my coffee and I journal. But lately and for a while, it's been the evening when everybody else is asleep and the dog is snoring at the foot of the bed and I'm reading my book by lamplight and everything is silent except for the background noise of the street, and my blankets are tucked in around me, and my teeth are brushed and the pillows are arranged comfortably, and the night stretches out in its welcome, just me and my book. I love that time. It feels so beautiful and perfect to me. I wish some nights it would go on forever. But eventually, I get tired and I surrender myself to sleep, as we all do. And you know what? Both of those times, the morning with coffee and the evening in bed with my book, and dinner at the table, all of those times, pandemic hasn't changed them. There's probably a good chance I can have some version of them my whole life. And that is lovely. We were talking with FOMO yesterday with a friend. FOMO, fear of missing out. And I suppose we all feel some of what we've missed out on. Time with family who are far away and friends, a chance to travel, some time in live venues with art and music and theater to transport us. I miss all of those. But I do wonder sometimes if a lot of what we mistake for the content of our lives is a little bit distraction. I thought the other day on my hike of how the trees and the mountains, in their stately presence, oblivious to all the things that fill my days with worry, seemed to be whispering through the clatter of leaves and grasses, "It's all good. Just this. Just this." Pandemic hasn't taken that away either. Maybe, in fact, it's making it easier to find. So I'll close with this other poem by Lynn Unger, who is a joy in my life. She's such a beautiful, accessible poet. This one is entitled Puzzle. Today, I mailed a package, walked over to get ice cream, coffee with those tiny chocolate flakes, then came home to a kitchen that was scented with gardenias that my neighbor cut for me yesterday. Here's the challenge. Count the blessings contained within this ordinary tale. Like the puzzle with all the triangles, the number you have chosen is almost certainly too low.